Hey and welcome to Never Went with Our Gun. So somebody made a post where they were saying that the Mighty Breaker's Ring of Clarity was essentially decreasing the damage bonus you'd gain from the Envenomed Storyteller Journal, and also when you would use it with the Pegasus that it would increase its damage bonus to 18%, and if you were to use it with the Mirage weapons you would actually get then a 56% damage bonus. Now this is a little bit interesting because if that was the case, that could become pretty overpowered pretty fast. So I had to dive a little bit deeper and do some actual math and testing. So we got those Mirage weapons, we got our Envenomed Storyteller Journal, and we got our Pegasus. And we can see straight up that when we do have this Might Breaker's Ring, you can see that indeed the Pegasus does say it's giving 18% damage. I'm not sure where this guy pulled out the number of 56%, but supposedly the way I read this properly is that the Mirage weapons would buff the damage of the Pegasus to 56%. Now this did get the attention of Nitocris, the community manager, and they said they would escalate it and put it under the Pegasus information, as already the Pegasus power is pretty much a mess. I've tested it in the past, and so we got to test this real quick with the 18% that it's displaying there. Is that indeed the case with this ring, as it could make it then a little bit better? Imagine that being 3% additional damage to your entire party rather than just 15%. And additionally, apparently this guy was saying it could buff it up to 56% with the Mirage weapons. I can't directly see any change with slotting in the Mirage weapons. Perhaps the guy did some testing for himself. Now additionally, many of you have been wondering, does the at-will ring, let's say the Wayseeker's Ring of Punishment, actually increase the damage of your Mirage clones? Because when you use an encounter power, you summon those clones. Overall, in my opinion, this weapon set is one of the most unique and cool by being able to summon clones of yourself. And those clones essentially can do damage with one of your at-wills, and on a rogue that's Duelist Flurry, and so it would make sense that if you increase your at-will damage, you'll also increase your clones damage. Now additionally, if you have older artifact weapon sets, you will then also be able to gain a bonus here of 10% to that at-will. Does that affect the Mirage clones? Well, let's get all these things tested out and showcase them in this video. There'll be timestamps in the video playbar below, so feel free to skip to any part you wish, and if you wish to just skip all the nitty gritty math stuff and just jump to the conclusion, well, skip to the TLDR. Before we get started, I'd like to give another massive thank you to all of these channel members for the continued support. So as usual, we head to Port Nyanzaru, and we use these reliable dummies to test our damage. You can just test it by using some math and looking in your combat log just here, or you can parse that combat log and have it in your ACT or your advanced combat tracker, which in my opinion is a lot easier, and you can see then the damage here. So I went and made a document to cover the testing that I did. We found first of all our own Duelist Flurry base damage, and we can see that was aligned with the math we were getting. That checks out, using the Duelist weapon modification and Skullcracker to get the damage buffs up to 1.2, which is 20%. Then we checked with Mirage, and we had these following stats here with this base damage of our item level, and we were getting a maximum hit of 22,754, and that was consistent as we were getting quite a few hits, doing the test again, and again similarly getting those hits. Now additionally, we're seeing like much lower hits. Not exactly sure what's going on, but the way I've seen Duelist Flurry working in the past is it didn't actually deal consistent damage, like the same damage per hit, and that's why I found testing on a rogue very frustrating. However, they seem to have changed Duelist Flurry. I'm not sure exactly when, potentially with Module 16 or if not later than that. And now as an at-will, it does deal consistent damage, but your clones seem to have the older effect where the damage does vary per hit. You can see that there. This is a critical hit, it is a flank hit, not a dodge, and you're only 10,900 damage, whereas up here it's pretty much more than double that damage at 22,000. So we're going to have a look and just compare the maximum hits we were getting. And straight off with this test, we could see that we were not gaining any bonus from the at-will weapon modification and Skullcracker. As you can see, we're still getting that over 22,000 on a hit, even without the weapon modification on our Mirage weapons. We now switch to like Shuriken Toss instead of Duelist Flurry. And so continuing on, we then found out that power didn't seem to affect the Mirage clones whatsoever. You increase your power up to like 89.4% from the 81.9%, and that gave no damage increase to the damage of our Duelist Flurry from our clones. You can see still 22,754, which is the same what we're getting here with lesser power. We check that with a damage buff from the Neverwinter Knight, and again still the same damage from the Mirage clone, so no effect from damage buffs as well. That was the similar effect we were getting with Skullcracker not actually providing. That's a damage buff, and it would add with the Neverwinter Knight for our own damage, but doesn't seem to affect the clones whatsoever. Then we check that out with combat advantage, and again increasing our combat advantage to 90% from previously 84.7% gave zero effect to that damage of our clones. We checked then with strength, so with that physical damage boost of 2% difference going from this 6.5% to 4.5%, still no difference in damage on the Mirage clones. Then we checked item level, and finally we get something that changes. We just simply slotted in a combat enchantment. Yes, of course it changed our stats, but since we've already tested that those stats don't actually affect our damage, the only change for the Mirage weapons was the item level. That did increase the damage, and finally we could dig out some of the math behind what was going on with those Mirage clones and how was their damage being effective. We can see by here that you were getting the 3% damage buff from specifically the Mirage weapons. As you can see when you actually hover over their tooltip, they say that Master of Illusion also does 3% more damage, which increases to 10% against enemies with shields at 10 HP. And those Master of Illusions are the clones that you summon. The Mirage weapons don't give you any damage boost other than the actual damage that your clones deal. And so we checked that with a offense combat enchantment and the Mirage weapons, and that extra 10% damage boost also had no effect with the Mirage clones. And going back to the item level, we tested against different types of item levels, and the power magnitude, really weird. That is 438 power magnitude that multiplies the damage that the clones deal, at least on their maximum hit. On the smaller hits, I assume they have lesser amounts of magnitude. And so that was checking out the math there. You simply just multiply this by this by this, and that's how much damage you were seeing. And this is equal to what we would see here. Now, moving on, we checked a debuff, and indeed, that at least actually works. And that's why the Mirage weapons can be good in like a trial scenario, because the damage of your clones does get increased by something like Wicked Reminder, which is a damage debuff of 10%. We then checked the Mighty Breaker's Ring of Clarity, and indeed it was actually increasing the damage of the Mirage clones, which is odd because like the Neverwinter Knight not increasing it, Skullcracker not increasing it. However, that ring, that special ring, seems actually to be increasing the damage of your clones. So you might very well want to run with this ring if you're relying on your Mirage weapons to deal a good bit of your damage, as that, looking at the math, does increase. You can see the base damage there without the ring was that 22,754, but with the ring we were adding 3% to our damage buffs, which strangely is separate from the Mirage damage buffs. They don't stack together, and they multiply your damage by 3% from your Mirage weapons up to 23,400, as you can see there. We checked the Wayseeker's Ring of Punishment, that ring that would supposedly increase your at-will damage, and unfortunately, no, that does not increase the damage of your clones, so there's no point running that ring in my opinion whatsoever. You can just run with the Mighty Breaker's Ring of Clarity, and then just run something that's going to increase your critical strike like that Ring of Absolution, not this at-will damage boost, as it's only 8%, and if your damage from your at-wills is only like 30%, which is a stretch, then 30% of 8 is only a 2.4% damage boost. You've already got the Ring of Clarity with 3%, you could run with a melee damage bonus ring with 3%, etc, etc. Now, I'm not saying the Mirage weapons are that great, as I've already made a video covering that the Stronghold weapons are better, and I would highly recommend you run the Stronghold weapons instead of Mirage. But Mirage you can get for free, but with a very long grind. So we ended up with this chart here, where we can see the Mirage damage buffs, and you can see how all of these things don't affect the clones of your Mirage weapons at all. And then you have the 3 that do here. I'm sure there are other things that do affect the damage, and I'm sure there's other things that don't. And you can see the Wave Seeker's Ring didn't affect it at all. Moving back to your man's post, we wanted to check out that Pegasus in combination with the Envenomed, and also then to see how the Mighty Breaker's Ring would actually affect it, as that was the basis. But it had led me on that big road of testing. And we can see that the Pegasus does say it would give 18% damage. It gives a bunch of forte as well. So we needed to test that, and we got again our base damage for our Duelist Flurry. You can see that there, 11,000, which corrects out with the math as what we were seeing in damage hits in game. And then we use the Mighty Breaker's Ring of Clarity with our Duelist, and we can see that is indeed giving a 3% damage buff. We use it with the Envenomed with our Duelist Flurry, and we can see we were indeed gaining a 5% buff from our Envenomed Storyteller Journal, as you can see in the tooltip. When you cast it, you increase your damage by 5%, but not when you use the ring. You can see switching out the ring, now it says 5%. And when we do use the ring, very oddly, it's turning down to a 3.2%. So we tested that. We used Envenomed with the Mighty Breaker's Ring of Clarity and Duelist Flurry, and it turns out it's only a visual bug and it works as intended. You are indeed getting a total of 8%. That's 5 plus 3. 8% damage buff, and the math was correcting out to give us that 12,476, as we can see what we're getting in game. Then we had to check out a bit further with the Pegasus. So we checked Pegasus with Duelist. And Pegasus, again, is giving you a bunch of buffs of 15% damage and then 15% forte. So depending on your class, like on a rogue, forte is combat advantage and power, and also deflect severity, which isn't going to impact your damage. So we have to take that into consideration. When we use the Pegasus with Duelist Flurry, we were seeing our damage getting increased to 14,000, which is exactly what we're seeing in game. And looking at the math, you can see that was because of the 15% damage buff, the power increase, and the combat advantage increase, and that all checks out. But then using it with the Mighty Breaker's Ring of Clarity, does it indeed give that 18% buff from the Magnificent Inspiration? And you might just look here real quick and be like, 18%. It does. No, it doesn't. This would be 21% if it gave 18% from the Pegasus and from the ring, because the way it works is it's only giving the Pegasus 15% and the Mighty Breaker's Ring 3%, not like 18% from the Pegasus plus 3% from the ring. We're only getting 18%, not 21%, and so it's working as intended. And so to conclude, the Mighty Breaker's Ring does not reduce the damage from your Envenomed Storyteller Journal, and it does not increase the damage from your Pegasus. It's purely visual bugs. And on top of that, the damage done by the Mirage Clones is indeed affected by the Ring of Clarity, but only by 3%, and the at-will bonus ring does not affect your Mirage Clones, nor does your weapon modification when you link it with the corresponding at-will damage that your clones would deal. And so here is the chart that I made with the tests that I have done, what does and what doesn't affect the damage done by those Mirage Clones. Again, hopefully that testing is insightful to you guys, especially you guys who are determined to run with Mirage weapons. They are decent personal weapons to use. They can definitely be good within solo content because, again, spawning those clones allows you to get combat advantage against your enemies quite easily, and otherwise just having those guys to distract enemies can help as well. But just running something that's going to increase your damage more consistently, like Lionheart in solo content, can be a little bit better, just because you can run up to enemies, and if you can one-shot them, that's better than having to two-shot them. And otherwise, the clones do take a little bit of time, before they actually do anything in combat. You can see summoning them, and then they can only hit one target at a time, and if you have multiple, you're better off just increasing your damage against everything by increasing your own powers. However, in boss fights, that's where Mirage weapons can shine, just by dealing that extra damage, and in a trial when you have lots of debuffs going, that damage from the clones can be increased by a significant amount, but still not up to par with the Stronghold weapons, at least on most classes. So again, I'd like to give a special thank you to all of these channel members for helping me keep my channel going. And if I present this well, consider leaving the video a like, and if you're new around here, consider subscribing. We'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.